Hello, dear students. Today I start with my revision series, which is Revise with Veronica, with CA Final IDT. And in the beginning itself, I want to make it very clear that the purpose of this series is not to give you detailed explanation, in-depth explanation of all the provisions, but this is only for you to be able to revise it again and again so that you are able to memorize these provisions. So this is only for revision purpose. Once you are done with your thorough revision, first round of thorough revision, only then I would suggest you to watch this video. After your first round of detailed revision, which you do yourself, after that please watch these videos as many times as possible so that you are able to remember all these provisions in the least time possible. Okay, so without wasting any more time, let's start with the most basic definition of goods and services. Guys, goods is defined under section 252 and services under section 2102. Now goods means every kind of movable property. Goods means every kind of movable property other than SM. What is SM? Securities and money. But it includes three things: AC, GC, and G. What is AC, GC, and G? Actionable claim, growing crops, and grass. So it includes AC, GC, and G, and things attached to land and agreed to be severed before supply. Severed means to remove. For example, sugarcane, it is removed from the ground before it is supplied. So goods, it means every kind of movable property other than SM, but it includes three things: AC, GC, and G, and things attached to land and agreed to be severed before supply. Next, services. Services means anything. Services means anything other than GMS. M and S, just like in goods, money, and securities, and this extra G is for goods. So other than G, it's just like your GMCS, but without a C. So services means anything other than GMS, but it includes two things. One is use of money, and next is its conversion from one FCD to another. What is FCD now? Form, currency, and denomination. So use of money or its conversion from one FCD to another plus separate consideration. So you must have charged a separate consideration for that particular activity to be called a service. Now guys, money and securities, they are neither goods nor services, but facilitating and arranging transactions in securities, that comes under services. Similarly, money related activities, like here we've mentioned it, use of money. This is just for clarification. Although money is not a service nor goods, money related activities and facilitating arranging transactions in securities, they both come under service, right? Next, let's understand section 7. Now section 7 is all about scope of supply. What are the activities that are included in supply? What are the activities that are excluded from supply? And what are supply of goods? And what are supply of services? Right? So section 7.1 talks about inclusions. 7.1 capital A talks about whether it is supply of goods or supply of services. And section 7.2 talks about exclusions, out of scope, or we also call it negative list, right? Out of scope. So the activities mentioned in this list, that is schedule 3 list, is out of scope of supply. There are three schedules here, schedule 1, 2 and 3. Remember, schedule 1 is given under section 7.1, schedule 2 is given under section 7.1a, 1 capital A, and schedule 3 under section 7 subsection 2. Now let's read 7.1 in detail. Section 7.1, it talks about the activities that are to be considered as supply. There are two bifurcations here, if for a consideration and if without a consideration. First, let's read for a consideration. All forms of supply of goods, service, both. That basically all forms of supply. So all forms of supply such as STB, ELR and LD. What are these STB? I have written it down here. This is for you to be able to memorize it easily. Sale, transfer, barter, exchange, lease, rental and license and disposal. So all forms of supply such as sale, transfer, barter, exchange, lease, rental, license and disposal, STB, ELR and LD, made or agreed to be made in course or furtherance of business related to business. Next is 7.1b is about importation of service. If it is for business purpose, then it is a supply. If it is for personal purpose, it is exempt, but OIDR to NTOR is not exempt, and here FCM is chargeable, is applicable. Forward charge mechanism is applicable. What is OIDAR to NTOR? OIDAR is online information and database access or retrieval, and NTOR is non-taxable online recipient. It could be government, it could be local authority, it could be an individual, it could be an unregistered person, anyone. Uh, something like Netflix. Okay. So what is the exemption here for personal purpose? OIDR to NTOR. OIDR, online information database access or retrieval, and non-taxable online recipient. Now, if without a consideration, activities in schedule 1, if the activity is without a consideration, then these activities what are listed in schedule 1 will be considered supply. Let's go through it now. This is a mnemonic I've given you, that is DRIP, for you to remember what is in the list, schedule 1 list. D for disposal of business asset, permanent transfer of business asset, right? Disposal of business asset where ITC availed on such asset, where ITC is availed on such asset. Now I want to elaborate this a little more. Okay. See, in case of disposal of business asset, yeah, disposal, sorry, okay, in case of disposal of business asset, it could be for a consideration or it could be without a consideration, right? Now if it is for a consideration and ITC availed, then it comes under 7.1a, right? Now if ITC not availed, but it is for a consideration, so when it is for a consideration, it is already covered under 7.1a. Now if it is without a consideration and ITC is availed, then it comes under 7.1c. So all these three they come under supply, and here if it is without a consideration and ITC is not availed, then this is not a supply. Okay, remember this, note it down, do not get confused. Now let's get back to where we were. Yeah, next, DRIP, D was for disposal of business assets where ITC availed on such asset. R for supply between related party and distinct person. Related party and distinct person. Exception here we have is employer to employee 50,000 rupees gift. I hope you remember this. Right? If employer gives employee gift of up to rupees 50,000 value, then it is not a supply. If it is above 50,000, then it will be considered a supply. Next, I for importation of service. Importation of service by a taxable person from related party or own establishment outside India in course furtherance of business, then it is a supply without consideration. If it is a supply between principal and agent without a consideration, of course, only goods, or vice versa, whether agent is supplying to principal or principal is supplying to agent, if without a consideration, it is still considered a supply. Now, for DRIP, in case of disposal of permanent disposal of business asset, then it whether it is for course of whether it is in the course of furtherance of business or not, it will still be a supply. But in case of RIP, that is related party, distinct person, importation of service by taxable person, and principal and agent, then it should be in course and furtherance of business. Okay, so 7.1 for a consideration, two things: all forms of supply such as STB, ELR, LD in course or furtherance of business. Second is importation of service, business purpose, and personal purpose. It is exempt, but OIDAR to NTOR is not exempt. In case of supply without consideration, what are the supplies that will be considered? What are the activities that will be considered? Is given under Schedule 1, and it is DRIP. D for disposal of business asset where ITC availed. R for related party and distinct person, supply between distinct person and related person, exception 50,000 gift employee. I for importation of services from related party, own establishment, in course furtherance of business. These three things, in course and furtherance of business, is important here, whether in course of furtherance of business or not. In both the cases, it is a supply. P for supply between principal and agent. Okay, so this was 7.1 that mentioned all the inclusions to be considered, all the activities that were to be considered as